Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa Colledge. Welcome to Culture by Neurodesign. Now, I've shared examples of 3 particular cognitive styles in recent episodes. I've talked about the style of wonder, which is constantly questioning whether we can't go beyond what currently is possible. That was in episode 17. I've talked about invention or originality, original ideas, and that's episode 16. And I've also talked about discernment, which is the ability to evaluate information very rationally, very objectively. That was episode 15. And in each of these 3 episodes, I've touched on how the complementary cognitive styles of different people can make a team really amazing at responding to change if we've also made sure that our team members, our different team members, know how to connect with each other and are rewarded when they do so. Now, today I'm going to dive more into this mechanism. And there is a published peer-reviewed theory from Helen Taylor, Bryce Fernandez and Sarah Raitt at the University of Cambridge that underpins the mechanism that I'm talking about. It's called the Theory of Complimentary Cognition. I'm going to talk about this theory so that when I apply it to the framework that I've developed, which is the framework of your team or your organization being able to respond quickly and confidently to change, you can feel very reassured that that framework is based on a solid foundation of high quality scientific research. Now, I enjoy remembering the first time that I read this paper. Don't get me wrong, it's a hefty paper, it's a long paper, you have to focus. But it was one of those times that I can remember exactly where I was. It was one of those pivotal moments of my life that reshaped how I thought about everything that was important to me at that time. My son's autism, how he fits into our family, how he can contribute to the world, how people in our teams can best work together, and also the future of work, given the recency of COVID at that time. I really found it incredibly exciting. But it's not a story that begins in an office, a boardroom, a lab. It begins millions of years ago as evolution was shaping the human brain and the social connections that we make with each other. Our evolutionary journey has given us, humanity, an absolutely remarkable gift. It's the ability to adapt through collaboration and diversity of thought. It's exactly what you want in your team if you need to be able to change. But it's a gift that we've almost forgotten how to use in many, many workplaces. So let's explore a bit of the science behind this theory and its relevance for how our teams can learn to innovate and adapt naturally to change. So in their paper on complementary cognition, Helen Taylor and her colleagues propose that the key to human success in evolutionary terms isn't having bigger brains, but smarter brains and smarter ways of each of us using them together in a group, in a society. So the core idea is that millions of years ago, humans were faced with extreme environmental variability, much more than we have these days. Think ice ages, think droughts, think the resulting unpredictable changes in resources. And we can see that this was the case from the geological record. So to survive, our ancestors had to be able to adapt. Now, instead of each individual becoming a cognitive jack of all trades, evolution took a different path for us, and it made us specialize. So I'm sure that one way of our brains having tried to do this was indeed to make us be a jack of all trades. It would have tried to make our brains keep on getting bigger and bigger and try to do all of the different kinds of cognitive tasks, such as wonder, invention and discernment, the ones that I mentioned earlier. But those ancestral human brains that tried to do that were unfortunately doomed, and they are no longer with us. Our ancestors are not here for a couple of reasons. So the size of brain that we would need to be able to do all of those things, each individual one of us be able to do all of those things, is bigger than would fit through the birth canal. It's not really useful for evolutionary success. And even without that constraint, the modes of brain function between cognitive tasks are quite different. There is a time and an energy cost in switching between them. We can see that now based on how our brains work, depending on whether they're focusing on the information which we're getting from our senses or our executive functions. The time and energy to switch between modes would have meant that our local saber-toothed tiger or the Tyrannosaurus Rex down the road would have killed us by the time that we'd made that transition. All right. So instead of making our brains just get bigger and bigger, evolution has caused us to divide and conquer. And what that means is that different individuals excel in different types of cognitive tasks. That's not a weakness, that's a strength, because it allowed communities to survive and innovate, adapt to all of those changing environmental conditions collectively together. None of us has a brain that can do everything. If we try to work that way now, it just doesn't work. I'm a solopreneur, but I cannot do everything on my own. I partner with people to be able to say that I'm a solopreneur. We're each specialists in a different kind of cognitive style. And as we evolve, we developed communication to be able to share our findings with each other. What do I mean by cognitive style? Let's take a look at that for a while. Cognitive style is the mental process of gathering and using information to solve problems. I tend to use it in an organizational, in a working context. So I tend to use it to mean it's the way that we think. But it's actually any way of interacting with something new. If you imagine that you're going hiking and there are new trails on offer, some people will prefer to stick with familiar trails. They're very good at exploiting what they already know and getting the most out of it. And some people prefer to venture into unknown areas and find something new. They're really good explorers. Neither is right or wrong. Neither is better or worse. It's just right or wrong, better or worse for that particular person. That's another example of how you can recognize a cognitive style. It's not only by thinking, it's about whether you take the new trails or not. Now, our ancestors faced this exact choice, physically or cognitively or whatever. And the best solution that evolution has found, and we know it's the best solution that was found because we're here and we can see it, is that some minds were wired to explore new patterns and innovate. And some brains became specialized in refining and perfecting what was known. Sorry, I shouldn't have said one brain innovated. I should have said one brain would be creative or original. Innovation is a team game. Please excuse me for that slip up. Easy to do. So if you want to know more about the framework that I've mentioned, that balance between exploring and exploiting, I talked about that in episode 13. But back to today. Now, according to the research, these cognitive differences are evolution's way of optimizing how we as a species can learn and can innovate. But think about our modern workplaces. Quite often, our modern workplaces encourage and recognize similarity, conformity, teams where people think alike and where there's no conflict. Right? We gravitate naturally towards comfort. We don't gravitate towards cognitive diversity because that means that we have to do some work to understand the perspective that is different, an approach that is different. But here's the irony. If we built teams this way, if teams conform, if they're comfortable, if there's no conflict, if we don't make any effort to understand different perspectives, then we lose exactly what made us humanity resilient in the first place, which is our ability to adapt by pooling our complementary ways of thinking. Any organizations that are prioritizing comfort over the slight discomfort of cognitive diversity are inadvertently, perhaps, but nevertheless, they are weakening the ability of their teams to be able to adapt to change. Teams like the ones I've just described become great at doing the same thing better and better and better, and there are situations when that is needed, and that's absolutely what you want to achieve. But teams like that are ill-equipped to handle disruption. Research shows that cognitive diversity, which is having team members with different ways of thinking, and the culture that enables people with those diverse cognitive styles to connect better, those teams have better outcomes. They are better able to solve problems, they have a stronger resilience to change, and they do much better in the long term at innovation. I'll put an article in the notes for this episode if you want to read a bit more about that. But for now, I'll come back to topic of evolution and the theory of complementary cognition, excuse me. So now there's some good news, even if you have gone for more of a cognitive fit than a cognitive mix. It's not game over, right? It's not too late. This evolutionary superpower isn't gone. It's just dormant, and you can revive it. Helen Taylor and her colleagues, their research highlights that complementary cognition isn't about reacting to a difference once somebody tells you about it or demonstrates it to you, right? It's about proactively creating the culture, the systems that attract and connect different cognitive styles. So imagine a leadership approach that sees different cognitive traits as strategic assets, not as problems, but strategic assets. This includes the neurodivergent traits, which are the most specialized version of our cognitive styles, such as the pattern recognition skills of somebody with dyslexia, or the hyperfocus of somebody with ADHD. So imagine a leadership approach that sees these strategic assets and then intentionally builds a culture and systems where these differences can connect and collaborate. Something incredible happens. The collective intelligence, the collective genius emerges naturally. This is inclusion. I talk about cognitive inclusion. Yes, it's inclusion, but it's so much more than inclusion. It's innovation at its finest. It's also talent management at its finest, because everybody is working in the way that they love to work, that they are good at working, in which they can show their best. Everybody is curious and learning from each other. It makes people engaged. It makes people not want to leave, and it makes other people desperate to come and join your team. So I'm focusing on innovation here, but there's a massive benefit in terms of your talent management as well. All right, how can you start tapping into this, for your team? Well, the good news is that you've already started. You're here, and I'm absolutely delighted that you're here. You're willing to spend a bit of time learning about the options to address a challenge that you have in your team. Or perhaps you don't have a challenge, perhaps your team is very successful, but you're looking for a way to make sure that it stays successful and becomes even more successful in the future. So let me invite you to take one more small step. So please take a look at episode 18 of this podcast, all right? In that episode, I introduced a free program that I've designed to help you to keep on taking small, manageable steps like the one that you're taking in listening to this podcast. The program is called Neuro-Inspired 12 Steps to a Future-Proof Workplace Culture. And it's a great balance between learning and action. I'll explain how you can do everything yourself and a few ways that you can get varying levels of support from me if you want. You don't have to, it's only if you want to. You don't need to commit to anything up front. Let's return to evolution for a moment. Our ancestors survived because they outthought their environment. It wasn't about outmuscling, it was about outthinking. And they did that together as a team. It wasn't each person fighting for their own individual survival. It was each person contributing to the group for the survival of humanity. We survive together or we don't survive. That's the message that you should take. So by building team cultures that reward cognitive diversity, you can also claim this advantage that evolution gave to us to make your team even more successful now and to keep it being successful in the future, regardless of whatever changes. So this will help you to be a leader who is ready to thrive in the face of uncertainty, instead of unknowingly, ignorantly steering your team towards uniformity and disengagement and stagnation. If you can enable cognitive diversity in your team, you won't just survive, you'll thrive. I promise. There's nothing else that can happen. It's how humanity is built. Thank you for joining me today. If this episode sparked some new ideas for you, please share it with someone in your network and help me to spread the word that our differences in thinking styles are not a challenge to overcome. It's actually humanity's greatest strength.